All right, Jody, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. So I am Jodi Latuszek. I am currently with Biggby Coffee Company here in East Lansing, Michigan. I'm an attorney, but here at Biggby, I am the vice president of HR, legal, and ESG programming. So I'm building those things for the company. Where I started out though is as an attorney. I always looked for ways to help people and also to use the law in creative ways, so that I was the person saying yes instead of no to people.
Yeah.
I had a long career as an attorney and with Michigan's court system,
Saw that.
overseeing courts. But when the pandemic came, Alex, you know, that put everything to the test. And I really ended the 2 years with the court system during the pandemic, really motivated to find a company to work for whose sole mission was about people practices, putting people first, and human centric leadership. So that's
Oh, I
what
love
brought me
that.
to Biggby. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I love the phrase human-centered leadership. My background was actually in design consulting, which is the human-centered design kind of theories and frameworks. So I'm
Awesome.
particularly au fait with that kind of type of organizational intelligence culture kind of work as well.
Great.
It's awesome. And it's awesome to hear that, I hear this a lot, especially people in hospitality, how like COVID was such a reset for everybody sort of in the industry in and of itself that a lot of large sort of brands themselves like reset a lot of their culture, norms, values, kind of back to basics. And it's interesting to hear, being a lawyer yourself and actually like, no, like resetting yourself and then coming into hospitality, there seems to be a whole new wave of like sort of like an appreciation for culture and the dynamics of what a good culture can do in the space.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, and I think it gave people, especially folks in HR or anyone in management, COVID gave us a front row seat, and sometimes it wasn't comfortable, to how our decisions as leaders and managers directly impact people's lives. How we dealt with them when they had sick relatives, whether we were flexible in time off, whether we
Yeah.
had benefits to take care of them appropriately. Making the wrong decisions in those times, we really saw the impact of it. And so, you know, straight to the heart and straight to the gut sometimes. It really
Interesting. Yeah, that's
really
awesome. And
yeah.
oh, sorry for interrupting you. Do you want to finish your thought there? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay.
I was going to say it's quite interesting in the sense that, like, I love hearing how people view the sort of trends that emerged post-COVID in sort of HR and people management. Are there things that you've seen that are like, how what you're doing in your role, you're trying to apply new norms, new values to that sort of like program for employee happiness, I suppose. Like I feel like lots of different flexible work schedules, kind of like different opening hours, like that kind of suit like, people coming commuting, that kind of stuff. Do you see that kind of trends that are like what you're doing that are you're applying that are successful in a sort of post-COVID way?
Yeah, so just very broadly, the trends that exist center around the idea that most employees, whether they work in our stores or whether they work at the corporate office, they won't they won't tolerate a company that is not flexible. They won't stay somewhere where they're unhappy. Their time is too important and their talent is important. And it's work-life balance. That phrase
Yeah.
is thrown around all the time. But it means something more to people now. So what we try to do is have policies and programs that offer people support and flexibility. Just some examples. So we offer peer-to-peer coaching for our employees, and that helps them through some of the emotional things that they're going through, or helps them achieve goals. So that's one
Yeah.
thing we've offered. But we also have like a sabbatical program where employees get 12 weeks off paid. And the idea is that it's designed so that they can work on their personal goals and dreams.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, though, we've really, as a leadership team, looked for ways to be more flexible with all employees, and then
Yeah.
built in more mechanisms so that we're constantly listening for feedback.
Yeah.
Did we get it wrong? Did we make a mistake? What ideas do you have? So constantly listening and being more flexible.
That's awesome. And it's cool that you kind of lean into that there because I think a lot about, you know, culture as like kind of like it's kind of the process enables the great culture. And a lot of people struggle to define culture. You know, it's hard to describe, but you know when you see it. But then at the same time, people do kind of struggle to articulate like process for enabling culture. And it's cool to hear you just say that there in the sense that you've designed the mechanisms that hopefully can unlock a lot of great culture within the organization.
Yeah. We hope so. I mean, we
Yeah.
see fruit from it every day, by way of happy employees who also have, rewarding personal lives. And if we keep hearing that and keep seeing it, we know we're doing something right. But we don't stop there. You can have your good engagement scores and just get complacent. The
Yeah.
one thing we keep doing is trying to innovate with culture, not for the sake of innovation, but with the understanding that things change every day. I mean, if you look at the difference between 2019 and 2020, companies that weren't like agile in their people thinking and people practices were caught off guard, and it took forever to catch up. We don't want to be in that position again. So we're constantly, on our toes, innovating,
Yeah.
thinking of new and better ways to do things.
That's awesome. And you know, it's interesting because that does speak to like a kind of broader industry question, which is like post-COVID, there's been a sort of struggle to hire enough people to kind of come into the restaurant or a restaurant, coffee shop, in any sort of hourly sort of position. And that question then led into like the quality people that you want that places wanted, which is like I get now we can get people, but I want good people. And now the topic has kind of the pendulum has swung over to sort of the retention side of things, which is like speaking to like that employee experience once you get them. And I'm curious in Biggby, for example, or just in general, your take on like sort of employee retention in this sort of era of like hyper competitiveness of trying to hire people in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the top thing for any employer is you have to put your money where your mouth is. People, especially younger employees, I mean, they're readily accessing market data. They know what they're worth. They know what they want to be paid. But not every employer can do that, and that's okay,
Yeah.
right? But if you can't pay a high dollar for every in the 75th percentile for every employee, you've got to invest in them by developing them. And that doesn't mean just, fancy titles. That means truly figure out where each employee wants to be, and have steps that they can see along the way, so that they know that next month I'm going to learn this. The month after that, I'm going to learn that. And
Yeah.
inevitably, in a couple of years, here's where I'm going to be because of it. They want to see constant development. And if they don't see that, they're going to leave.
That's interesting. And I take it there are like some great success stories at Biggby or people have kind of come in at sort of like the ground level and kind of worked their way into sort of positions of leadership within the organization as well.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, I didn't catch that full question.
Sorry. I was saying that, you know, are there I presume there are like numerous success stories in Biggby of people who kind of come in at the ground level and have followed what you're saying there from like all the way up into sort of senior management leadership positions.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely have numerous examples of that. We have folks on our executive team, who worked their way up from being a barista.
Yeah.
Like our chief purpose officer, Laura Ike, had been a barista and worked her way up.
Wow.
One of our vice presidents of development has been with the company about 25 years and has served
Love that.
I think just about every role. So there are those historical transitions. But now the key thing with newer employees and the next generation is they won't stay 10 years to get there. So we need
Yeah.
to be more hands-on about providing them development along the way.
Awesome. And do you think like as like a sort of HR leader yourself, like what are sort of like roadblocks you think like that exist in your role for like finding that kind of talent
Um,
or challenges? That's an easy, that's a nicer way of phrasing it.
yeah, I mean, money is always a challenge, but it's really um it's almost that we talked a little bit about marketing before we started this call, but it's the traditional marketing for recruitment. um so telling the story about who your company is and getting employees to understand, and kind of feel that, so that they want to come in. A lot of the candidates we get at Biggby apply to us not because they want to work for a coffee company, but because they believe in our purpose and they believe in what we're doing. So they've watched our co-CEOs, Mike
Yeah.
McFall and Bob Fish, on TED Talks and things like that.
Yeah.
So they learn who we are and what we're doing. They believe in it, and then they apply. But getting people to apply to us for that reason on a broad scale and the numbers that we would need, is a challenge. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I hear that a lot from your peers that like, you know, I guess we moved past that COVID on rush of needing bodies and very much into sort of the quality side and like figuring out what are those sort of like key indicators, those intangible indicators that make somebody like, a high potential hospitality kind of executive almost, which is like, any service can be taught but I had a guy on recently who was the director of operations at Amman Hotels, like Amangiri down in Arizona,
Mhm.
those kind of very fancy hotels. And we were laughing because we were using a French phrase called a certain je ne sais quoi, which is which is like, and when you see it, and it's like how do people kind of isolate that sort of je ne sais quoi of like we can teach you the service, but how do we get you from like a barista to general manager? Like what is it about that person that we can kind of promote upwards and then from general manager into sort of a more corporate kind of role? It's like I wonder, are there things that you see in your role that like you're trying to isolate or yeah, I'd love you just to kind of speak a bit about that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it is everything that je ne sais quoi. I like it. The people management side and the human centric leadership. It is everything, and it's not something that traditional interview practices really pick up. Um, we sometimes we don't notice it's there or not there until somebody's already hired. So things I look for, though, is just once people are working here, I see people, especially executives, who are willing to roll up their sleeves, who are good listeners,
Yeah.
who make decisions based on the bottom line, but the bottom line with the impact on people, as first, the impact on people
Yeah.
first, and good communicators who are authentic. So we all know people who can tell a good story, give a good sales pitch, um, but it's pretty easy to tell when people are inauthentic.
Yeah.
Um, so in
Especially in
interviews,
hospitality.
yeah. So in interviews, we really try to have people do a lot of storytelling, not fiction. we want we want real stories of experiences they've had where they've developed employees, where somebody has impacted them, and through those stories, you can hear the thing that the special quality that sets people apart. So we try to do that, and you know what? We're not perfect at it yet. We're
Yeah.
always looking for better ways to assess that sooner, because it means a lot.
No, totally. And it's interesting because I've not heard from anybody and I have done a lot of podcasts now. And I've not heard anybody actually be able to really put their finger on that je ne sais quoi, that intangible. And I guess that's what makes finding those people and retaining them so important, and having those programs for retention in the first place really, really kind of exists so that you can unlock their capability and their potential. Because what you're really trying to find is, to your point about your colleague who was the chief purpose officer who's been there since the
Mhm.
barista, it's finding more people like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's like how do we unlock that sort of capability internally? Because like, you know, you are your people, and especially in hospitality. You know, I had somebody on from Craveworthy Brands a couple months ago, and she was telling me that like, you know, guests like are very unlikely to remember a good experience, because if they have a good one, they'll probably come back and they kind of all kind of merge into one. But they absolutely will remember that one bad experience. And so you're kind of the pressure is on essentially like how well your people within the store actually deliver that really good experience so that they kind of come back again. You know, and I think about that a lot when it comes to like people management and finding great people, because great stores, great coffee shops, great restaurants with a great GM, you feel that experience immediately. Or with great people within on the floor, you feel that with the moment you walk in, and you definitely notice the difference when you don't feel that. So I think it's very, very interesting, and it's like one of these kind of questions that I think everybody in HR and people management is trying to figure out, is like how to spot those sort of like kind of more kind of exceptional people, I guess, you know, because to
Sure.
be an exceptional person in hospitality is to be an exceptional person almost, because the whole job is predicated on making people feel at ease and feel comfortable and feel like they're like the one in a million customer, you know?
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you. And you hit 20 minutes there. Could you believe that?
No, that flew by. It flew by. I have to admit, it was a little comforting to hear that nobody could quite put their finger on, what
Yeah,
that special thing is. So I suppose I'm in good company.
totally. I mean, it's funny, like I've not heard from anybody at this stage, like anything so otherworldly that either like blows my socks off or concerns me. I think I mean, you guys have so many locations, and in your sort of elevated sort of peer group of other kind of large restaurant groups, hospitality groups, resorts, hotels that would manage that same similar amount of people, it's all trying to solve for this in this sort of post-COVID era, which is like a lot of the sort of like GM class left hospitality, and now they're trying to fill a gap of that sort of leadership gap in between, which is like, how do we, the good people that we have, how do we think about promoting those people into sort of GM roles? But it's like there's just not enough in the marketplace now. And so that's why there's a real battle for that really good talent at the top of funnel, which has consequential effects on sort of retention, which is like, how do you design retention programs to keep them once they're there? So like, I guess my overarching thought is that like, a lot of hospitality is in a good place if there's good leadership to put the processes in place to let to greenhouse effectively great culture, and I think that's it. I mean, that's what the processes do. They just greenhouse culture. Those
I
little
love that.
buds.
No, I love it. And that's exactly the way we think about it. So
Yeah.
definitely love it. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, Alex. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I enjoy what you do.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, wonderful, wonderful guest, and it's funny like how we always start these, and here we are 25 minutes later after we started. Do you know what I mean? Like we kind of flew through it, and nobody ever expects it to be like, oh, and we're done. It was that quick, and I appreciate how articulate you were here, and how candid you were as well. Like, I mean, I think it's great, and I think like Biggby's is so lucky to have you. I mean, you have such a ridiculously awesome background, and to be in the
Thank
role
you.
you're in, and to be so passionate about solving people problems when lots of people in lots of organizations aren't. So I think it's great to like that you have found that sort of post-COVID purpose yourself and are now kind of applying it to Biggby, and I think they're absolutely lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.